60 years of Deutsche Welle, in dialogue with the world. In the interview, Deutsche Welle Director General Erik Bettermann.
Deutsche Welle is celebrating its 60th anniversary. Mr. Bettermann, what's your greatest wish to mark this occasion?
I hope that Germany's international news and information channel will find its place in a rapidly changing global environment. With technology evolving rapidly, the competition is fierce. But my vision is that we reach an increasing global audience, focusing on those people who have an abiding interest in Germany. Our foremost goal remains the continuing development of information and education. That is my greatest hope for Deutsche Welle.
DW aired for the first time on May 3, 1953. Back then, the Cold War was in its infancy. Since that time, the world has changed and DW has changed with it. Looking back, what are some historic milestones with special meaning for DW?
It's important to remember that May 3, 1953 was still in the post-World War II era. In an interview at the time, German President Theodor Heuss advised that Deutsche Welle should introduce the reborn, democratic and peaceful West Germany to the world. And DW did just that. We played a major role throughout the Cold War, during the entire conflict between Eastern and Western Europe, between NATO and the Warsaw Pact nations. But it wasn't just in Europe, it was global. In today's world, we've made marvelous progress and technological advances, and not just since German reunification. These things have truly changed the world. But as you said, information is truly a global medium. Worldviews have changed dramatically, and multimedia is the watchword. We seek to reach a global audience, use our uniquely German experience, our values, and also the negative experiences of dictatorship, whether during the Nazi era or communist East Germany. We hope to pass on these experiences and values for a paramount reason: to help grow a global civil society.
Returning to DW's past, was it really so different in the 50s, 60s and 70s? In how many languages did we broadcast back then?
The number was much smaller. To begin with, we broadcast only in German for expatriates, Germans living abroad, representing the new Germany. I just referred to the quote from Theodor Heuss. Then, throughout the Cold War, we began broadcasting in some very exotic languages. As Europeans were used to hearing English, French and Spanish. But when we started adding Swahili, Amharic and Urdu, those were languages that suddenly took on added importance during the Cold War. It wasn't just Europe that was divided during the East-West conflict. Africa was also split into spheres of influence. That was a time when we added on languages until we had about 30, the same number as today. The subject matter has changed dramatically. Today we're an information provider from a uniquely German viewpoint. We're Germany's media greeting card in terms of exporting information and education.
Let's use Russia as an example. You're saying the mandate is different now than during the Cold War.
Of course, during the Cold War, our mandate was to provide listeners in the former Soviet Union with a window on the values honored by the free world. These days, things have changed. We're concentrating now on building social and cultural bridges, promoting understanding between peoples. You can't underestimate the value of programs like these. They've shown enormous effectiveness. For example, you, a woman, are interviewing me. Viewers in Saudi Arabia will be able to watch it, a country where women's rights are nowhere near as advanced as here. They're not allowed to drive cars. But a global media outlet can be an agent for change. Women in Saudi Arabia might watch this and think, why shouldn't I be able to drive a car? I would say that is a very practical matter. We are a conduit of information and content, especially for people who are interested in Germany. We communicate to them in their language. We want to expand the reach of our language, and technological development now allows Germans living abroad internet access to just about every program produced by German radio and television networks.
Exactly. Do we really need to produce programs in German?
That's an interesting point. As I've pointed out, things are changing due to the increasing number of international media outlets. Our mandate has changed dramatically. We're focusing more extensively on providing a window on Germany and reporting events from a German perspective. Events such as the Boston bombings are reported from a uniquely German angle. And we communicate the German media system, which a lot of global media players envy us for.
Earlier, you used an Arab country to prove your point. What role does or should DW play as the Arab Spring, the Arab Revolution, unfolds?
Let's look at the so-called Arab Spring countries, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt. Our Arab Bureau has been covering those events in Arabic. So when leaders and policymakers from those countries visit Berlin, they often make it a point to book interviews with Deutsche Welle. Why is this the case? It's because they know that Deutsche Welle's Arabic channel has a big following back home. And we further underscore that tendency with a project we launched about 10 years ago called the Deutsche Welle Academy. In the meantime, we've trained some 3,000 journalists from around the world. You can't forget that 2/3 of the people on this planet live in countries without freedoms of the press. They get their information from state-run media, military media, and from dictators. So for them, freedom of the press is something worth pursuing. I'd wager to say that press freedom is an essential cornerstone of democracy, and that democracy is essential to economic development. Once international investment picks up, government corruption is exposed to the people. The developments are positive. DW's mandate is to provide information and support democratic change.
How do we compare with other international media outlets? How do our roles differ? You've got the old standards, BBC, France 24, there is Russia Today, China's CCTV, Al Jazeera based in Qatar. There's also Hispan TV and Press TV from Iran. Where do we stand?
That depends on which country we're talking about. We are an international news and information channel based in Germany. We're a society that also had a difficult time establishing basic human rights. Only after the Nazi dictatorship in World War II did we enshrine a constitution that guaranteed freedom of the press. That message is part of our mandate. Of course, there are similar networks with the same basic values, such as the BBC and France 24. The U.S. also has global channels, so do Spain and Portugal. But turning to Russia Today, it's a very professional organization, nearly flawless from a technical standpoint. But the subject matter is much different and is heavily influenced by the Kremlin. It's the same story with China's CCTV. Iran's Press TV is in the same boat. They have what I'd call a missionary function. In Africa, there is a lot of political agitation. The programs are overtly political in nature.
Information wars or intense competition?
I wouldn't call it an information war, but there is competition from the media giants, and it's combined with rapid change. Right now, there are 26 global news and information channels. The BRIC nations are considering launching a global media presence. For them, it doesn't really matter how many viewers or users there are. It's a question of establishing a presence. For us, it doesn't matter what government is in power. We continue to provide global information.
DW is financed by the government. Just how independent are we, and how do you ensure that independence?
I've been General Director for 12.5 years, and I have never once seen an attempt to influence our legal and journalistic independence. even when our website reported damning evidence from an investigative committee against a former foreign minister. That report was copied onto the UN General Assembly website in New York. Journalistic independence is our most cherished value. It is codified. We remain an independent news gatherer.
As you just mentioned, 12 years as General Director, 1/5 of DW's existence.
I'm older than DW.
And you're retiring soon.
In September.
Tough decision?
A lot has changed in my 12 years at the helm of DW. It's taken an enormous amount of energy. But I also believe that after 12 years, it's time for others to come in with new ideas and influences. The DW Council has made its decision, and I'm certain it was a fine choice. My successor is a widely renowned journalist in Germany. Perhaps he will concentrate on refining the journalistic aspects of our content. During my tenure, I concentrated far more on restructuring and setting a new course for DW based on rapidly changing technological advances. And of course, I've also launched some new programs along with my colleagues that might not have been possible before. Think about it. Since last year, we've been telecasting in Spanish 24 hours a day, with just 4 hours of German programming in between. Our programs are picked up by channels throughout Latin America. As General Director, I've traveled extensively to 180 countries over the past 12 years. The UN recognizes only 196, if I remember correctly.
Just 16 to go.
Maybe when I retire.
Mr. Bettermann, thank you.
Vielen Dank für das Gespräch.
Dankeschön.